Probably he'll go with his parents, but I don't think he goes to any church, even back home.
Okay, let's pray and then we'll get it started, okay? Heavenly Father, thank you so much for bringing all of us here. I pray that as we go over Sabbath school material, that we would treasure your words more and have faith in your words more. Continue to be with us as we go into our study. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Amen. Okay, let's go over number 1 together. All right. What's our main verse for our series? If someone asked you about your hope as a believer, be prepared or be ready to explain it, but do this in a gentle and humble way. Okay, last week, this is review from last week. Okay, what's the argument? One day Jesus was just a mere human, and then the next day he became divine or divinity or God. Okay, they said they voted him in as a, right? Before that he was just a prophet, nice teacher. Okay, what's false about the divinity argument?
The author says that this is a fiction.
Okay, so the author already mentions that it's it's historical fiction. What else? What other things are false?
There was a council or something that made Jesus into like God.
Okay.
But they didn't do it there. They just.
So there was a council. There was a council of Nicaea in 325. But did they vote on whether he was a human being or God? No. Okay, they didn't do that. Okay. Is it also true that that's where they decided what book goes into the Bible and what book goes? That's also not true either. Okay. So, but we said, okay, so Da Vinci argument, it's not based on reality or history. But we said, okay, let's look at all the different Gnostic Gospels that we do have. Okay. What are some of the reasons why Gnostic Gospels are not reliable?
It was not written around the same time when Jesus was alive.
Okay, so number 1, it was written much later. Okay, 100 or 200 years after Jesus. So you guys can see that's problematic because
they don't know him.
Okay, they don't know him. So how are they going to write a biography about him? Okay. What else?
We don't know who wrote those.
Oh, also we don't know who wrote them. Who actually wrote these Gospels? Okay, that's another good one.
You know, one of the guys say he didn't, he was just making it up.
Oh yeah. One of them actually, he said he found the Gospel, but it didn't exist. Yeah. Any other reasons why it was not reliable? One of the books, I forgot which one, they didn't understand the cultures and the politics of those times as well. That's another one. Okay, so let's look at the Gospels in the Bible, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Why are these ones more reliable than the Gnostic Gospels at least?
The time that they wrote.
Okay, so they wrote it
Around
the same, very close to when Jesus was actually alive.
And we know who wrote those.
And we actually know the people who wrote them actually knew Jesus, or knew the people who knew Jesus. Okay. Very good. All right, let's go over today's argument then. Okay, so I have a question for you guys. Have you ever been in a car accident? So talk about with your people next to you guys, worst car accident perhaps that you've been in. Okay, so with people next to you guys, worst car accident that you've been in.
I was in the States, and then I went back to Korea just for the vacation, and then back in the summer. I was taking my mom to dinner, and then it was not raining, but not like, hail, like, something in the summertime. So it was like, what's happening? Yeah. Yeah, so we don't have hail. And then like I did
There once. I'll give you.
like a couple of seconds before I was like, oh, I tried this one today. The radiator was I missed 2 days. The thing is that my mom was coming to get her.
That's good.
Okay, let's come back. Let's come back. Okay, so I'm going to give you an imaginary situation of a car accident. So let's say me, Richard, and Danny were in one car, and then the girls over there are in another car, and then let's say we don't know each other and we get in a car accident. So obviously, what are we going to say? Danny, me, and Richard. We're going to say it's their fault. Okay, it's their fault. Okay? And most likely they're going to say it's their fault. Yeah, they're going to say that. Most likely. No. They're probably going to say it's our fault. Okay? So when you're in some kind of accident, what's the best witness? It's going to be third-party witness. Okay? So if we had another car right there, and they actually saw the accident, okay? So, okay, we're going to see that a third-party witness is going to be very, very important because you're always going to be biased towards yourself. Do you guys know who this person is by any chance? Okay, Billy Graham. Okay, Billy Graham. Okay, so right here, this guy right here, his name is Billy Graham. And then right next to him, right here, his name is Charles Templeton. Okay, and we're going to talk about this person. So basically, as you guys know, Billy Graham, he's like one of the most well-known Christian evangelists. So during that time, Charles Templeton in Canada, it was like Billy Graham over there. Okay? But something happened, long story short, he basically lost his faith. And then he wrote a book, My Reasons for Rejecting the Christian Faith. So it's kind of like Billy Graham losing his faith. It was very like a big deal. Okay? And this is what he said in his book. Okay? This is one of the things. He talked about many reasons why he doesn't believe in Jesus. But one of the things why he doesn't believe in Jesus, he said, there isn't a single word about Jesus in secular history. Not a word. No mention of him by the Romans. Okay? So do you understand what he's saying? He's saying, of course, in the Bible, we have things about Jesus. Jesus did miracles, Jesus did good things, Jesus did this, and Jesus did that. Of course, but they're biased. Just like, again, if you got into an argument or an accident, you go, oh yeah, it's their fault. Why? Because you're biased. But he's saying we have no single word about Jesus in secular history. Secular history meaning non-religious. Okay, we have nothing about Jesus. Okay? Let's go into discussion questions really quick. How would you reply to him if he said that to you? So he said, why are you a Christian? How can you believe in the Bible? What if Jesus never existed in history? What if disciples just created him? Okay? Because there's no, again, how can we verify? There's nothing in secular history to verify whether he even existed. So how would you reply to Charles Templeton? Number 2, if what he's saying is true, what kind of problems would there be? Okay, so people next to you guys, go for it.
Governing power, who cares about it? I don't think it was. If you look at the world power, then maybe I'm doing the opposite. He may not be, but all of a sudden his followers became more and more prominent. So I don't feel like the fact that he's not in secular history is nothing but a problem.
So if this was true, what kind of problems would there be?
Hold on. So obviously, if you're saying that there is no
No.
so they're saying that if Charles Templeton he does not, he's no version of history, which seems to imply that there is evidence of it in history. But what the problem, what kind of problems are these? Like his credibility from, I don't know, credibility to like the supposedly Jesus existed.
Hey Anna.
I guess seriously just they haven't made up.
I guess Christianity would be a great movie.
So speaking of the book, declared that this is a fiction, not a based on it.
Every man for himself. Law of the jungle, survival of the fittest.
The committee, what the group says, what they were doing, actually they were wrong. They didn't decide which books were going into the Bible or not. They didn't decide at that time. And then they did
Hello, hi Shinju.
they're gonna different.
All right, let's go over. Okay, so this person, he argues that the Bible is not trustworthy, basically, and that there is no historical Jesus. Why? Because, listen, there's not a single word about Jesus in secular history, not a word, according to him. No mention by him, by the Romans. So if he was such a big deal, and he was a big shot, why is it that none of the historians, secular historians, even write about him? Okay, most likely because he was just a fictional character that the disciples created. So again, once again, of course in the Bible they're going to say Jesus, 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 but it's very biased. Okay, so what's the argument against this? Well, number one, you guys have to understand that Charles Templeton is not a historian. Okay, so just because he makes a claim about history, that doesn't mean anything. Okay, so we're going to actually see that he's absolutely wrong, and we're going to go over some of the secular historians that actually mentions Jesus. So let's look at historian number one. His name is Josephus. Okay, he was born 37 AD, so about 3-4 years after Jesus died. Okay, he was a Jewish historian. He was a Pharisee. But as you guys know, Jewish people hated Christians, so no bias there. He worked for the Romans. and he was hated by the Jews. Okay, so he was actually a Jewish historian, but then after the Romans conquered the Jewish people, he basically said, "Oh, I'm a historian. I'll work for you guys," kind of a thing. Okay, and he wrote about the Jewish-Roman War that happened AD 66 to 74. So all the information that we have as far as the Jewish-Roman War, it comes from Josephus. So we know, that's how we know that the temple and Jerusalem was ruined. And you guys know like the Wailing Wall and things like that, we have that information because of Josephus.
Can I just defend him just one thing?
Josephus?
Yeah.
Yes.
He actually was a general of a Jewish army. It was, like in those days, like being a religious leader, political leader, and become a general too. And so initially he actually fought for the Jewish independence.
Absolutely.
In
Yeah.
1868.
Yeah.
And then he was a very smart guy. He said, you cannot really fight against a tank with a knife. That's what was happening. So he actually joined a group of Jewish leaders to say, let's work with the Romans and let's not just kill all ourselves. That's how that's really.
Yeah. That's Pastor Justin Yang. He'll be our speaker today.
Come join us.
Carry on.
All right, so let's see what Josephus actually says. Okay, about. So he wrote history of the Jewish people, and he mentions Jesus. Okay, this is what he says. Now, there was about this time, Jesus, a wise man. So obviously he doesn't say he's the Messiah. Okay? Because why? He's just a wise man. For he was a doer of wonders. He drew many after him. When Pilate, at the suggestion of the principal men among him, had condemned him to the cross. Okay? Those that loved him at first did not forsake him. So the disciples didn't forsake him, even when he died. And the tribe of Christians, so named from him, are not extinct at this day. Okay? So what information do we get about Jesus? Number one, okay, there was a guy named Jesus for sure. Oh, sorry. Okay, he died on the cross. What else? Under a guy named Governor Pilate. So it tells you even the Roman governor's name. What else?
Miracles, wonders.
Okay, that's some kind of miracles. Okay, we talked about that. And then there was actually people who followed him. And they're willing to, even after he died, they're willing to continue on. Okay, so again, that verifies what the Bible talks about as well. Yes? Next one. This one is a little confusing, but I'll explain afterwards, okay? But the younger Ananias, okay, who, as we said, received the high priesthood, was of a bold disposition and especially darling. So it talks about this guy. He became the new high priest. And they talk about how he's a very bold person. He's very courageous. Okay. He followed the party of the Sadducees, who were severe in judgment among all the Jews, as we have already shown. As therefore Ananias was of such a disposition, he thought he had now a good opportunity, as Festus, Roman governor, was now dead, and Albinus, new Roman governor, was still on the road. Okay, so basically, the governor that was there, he died. Something happened to him. And then, so the new governor has to fly in. Not fly in, they have to walk. So it's going to take a long time. So there's no Roman governor. So now he's like, oh, we have some freedom. I could do whatever I want right now. Does that make sense? All right. So he assembled a council of judges and brought before it the brother of Jesus, the so-called Christ. So again, do you guys see? He said the so-called, because he doesn't believe. He's a Jew. He doesn't believe it. Whose name was James. Okay, together with some other people, having accused them as lawbreakers, he delivered them over to be stoned. Okay, so again, from here, what can we know? There's a guy named Jesus, yes. What else?
His brother named James.
He has a brother named James. And what happened to him?
It was going down.
He gets stoned. Okay? He gets killed for his belief in Jesus. Does that make sense? Okay? Again, do we find this information in the Bible as well? Yes. We know that James dies. All right. And some people are like, well, I didn't know that Jesus actually had brothers and sisters and things like that. Well, it's right here. Dan, if you could read this for us.
Jesus returned to Nazareth, his hometown. When he taught there in the synagogue, everyone was amazed and said, "Where does he get this wisdom and the power to do miracles?" Then they scoffed, "He's just a carpenter's son. And we know Mary, his mother, and his brothers, James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas. All his sisters live right here among us. Where did he learn all these things?" And they were deeply offended and refused to believe.
Okay, so how many brothers did Jesus have?
4.
At least 4. Okay, right here, James, Joseph, Simon, Judas. How many sisters?
We don't know.
We don't know, but at least more than 1. Okay? So that's what we can find about Josephus. Okay, let's go to another historian. His name is Tacitus. He was born 56 AD, about 30 years after Jesus. He's a Roman historian. Okay, they call him the father of Roman history because most of what we know, majority of what we know about Romans, comes from him. So he's a very, very famous historian. He's specifically famous because he wrote about Nero, Emperor Nero, which happened in 64 AD. Okay, Nero is famous because he actually burned down Rome. Okay, now Tacitus, he writes about this. Okay, the historian, he writes about Nero. And then we'll see what we can find about Jesus. Okay, this is what he says. Yet, no human effort, no princely largesse, nor offerings to the gods could make that infamous rumor disappear that Emperor Nero, had somehow ordered the fire. Therefore, in order to abolish that rumor, Nero falsely accused and executed with the most exquisite punishment those people called Christians, who were infamous for their abominations. So what is Tacitus saying? He's saying Nero, he started the fire, and he wants to hide that fact, obviously, from the people, but he's like paying people off and things like that, but it's not working. So he's saying he has to accuse somebody. So who does he accuse? Christians. Why? Because they were already infamous for their abomination. So people already didn't like Christians. So let's just blame the Christians. Okay, that's what Nero did. And he gives some information to the reader, Tacitus, about these weird abomination people called Christians. Okay, the originator of the name Christ was executed as a criminal by the procurator Pontius Pilate during the reign of King Tiberius. And though repressed, this destructive superstition erupted again. And so again, you see, does he think highly of Christians? No, he calls them, they're superstitious, abomination. He's saying these people are crazy people. Okay, but he's just talking about them. Not only through Judea, which was the origin of this evil, but also through the city of Rome, to which all that is horrible and shameful floods together and is celebrated. So he's giving us some information about where this sect, this cult, this horrible, evil people came from. Okay, so just from here, what do we know about Tacitus? What do we know about Jesus? So again, we know he existed. What else?
He died.
Okay, he died as a criminal under Pontius Pilate. So he's saying the same thing as Josephus, who said the same thing as the Bible. Okay, what else? Where did it start? Judea. And then now it's spreading throughout Rome as well. Okay, so again, do you see this information? Is this contradictory to what the Bible says? No, it affirms it. Next part it doesn't have anything to do with Jesus, but it describes Christians a little bit more, and I think it's really good. Lauren, if you don't mind reading for us.
Therefore, first those received who admitted their faith, and then, using the information they provided, a vast multitude were convicted, not so much for the crime burning the city, but for hatred of the human race. In perishing, they were additionally made into sports. They were killed by dogs by having the hides of beasts attached to them, or they were nailed to crosses and set upon. And when the daylight passed away, they were used as nighttime lamps.
Okay. So he's very descriptive of how these Christians, how they were killed by Nero. Okay, so they got a few of them, and then they tortured them and got more of them. And then what do? They're made into sports. So you guys remember the movie Gladiator? Things like that. So imagine something like that. People are like cheering and like they have like piece of like meat attached to them. And so they're having like wild dogs and animals like chase after them. Some of them are being crucified. They're being lit into fire, and they're used as nighttime lamps. Okay, so very, very disgusting acts going on. Abby, if you could read the next one for us.
Nero gave his own gardens for the spectacle of public secrecy, and the habit of a charioteer, mixing with the flaps for driving about the race course, even though they were clearly guilty and merited being made the most recent example of the consequences of crime. People began to pity the sufferers, because they were consumed not for the public good, but on account of the fierceness of hunger.
Okay. So again, they're making like circus out of this whole situation. But even the people, they all know that it's because of Nero. Nero blamed, right? So there's nothing wrong with, but again, now they start to feel pity. So they start with entertainment. They're like, yeah, these people are being killed. This is great. And then by the end of it, they're like, oh man, this is horrible. Okay, that's how bad it was. This is just an artist's description of what happened to these Christians. It talked about how like a lot of them, they were just like at the end, they were just coming together and praying. And then in the back right here, you see like people being crucified in the back, and they were being burned alive. Okay? So again, that tells you how far these Christians were willing to go. Okay, so they believed in something. So much that they're willing to die for this. Because they could easily just say, I'm not Christian. Okay, let's skip. What do I? Okay, he's going to mention something very similar. PLINY the Younger. He's a Roman governor of the northwest Turkey. So he's just another governor. And he's writing a letter to another Roman person, official. And he talks about these Christians. It's very similar, but we're going to get some more information about Christians. Hyuna, if you don't mind reading.
I asked them whether they were Christians or not. If they confessed that they were Christians, I asked them again, and a third time, intermixing, threatening with questions. If they proceed in their confession, I ordered them to be executed. They meet together before it was light, and to sing a hymn to Christ, as to a God alternately, and to oblige themselves by sacrament for oath, not to do anything that was ill, but that they would commit no theft or adultery, that they would not break their promises or deny what was deposited with them, when it was required back again.
Okay. So it talks about, again, remember, Christianity was illegal back then. So he said, are you a Christian? Okay? And they said, yes. Okay, I'm going to arrest you if you're a Christian. Are you a Christian? Yes. I'm going to torture you if you say you're a Christian. Are you a Christian? They're like, yes, I'm a Christian. Okay? He's writing this letter to say how to deal with these Christians, because they're stubborn in his eyes, right? But he talks about them. He says, again, they sing songs, and before they wake up early in the morning to sing songs to him, they meet together to what? To, again, Christ, as to a God. So they're worshiping this Jesus as a God. Okay? And they're also committing themselves not to do bad things. not to steal. If they steal something, they're going to give it back, things like that. Okay? Again, very similar to what we see in the Gospels. Joshua, if you could read this for us.
After which it was their custom to depart and to meet again at a common but innocent meal, which they had left off on the edict which I published at your command, and wherein I had forbidden any such conventicles. These examinations made me think it necessary to implore by torments what the truth was, which I did of two servant maids who were called
Deaconesses.
deaconesses.
Okay, thank you for that. All right. So they meet together. They have this innocent meal together, which we call communion. Okay, so they're meeting together, having communion. And even there's servants among them. So there's different classes as well. Okay, it's not just for the elite, or it's not just for the low class. Okay, and they're called deaconesses. Okay. So again, what do we find out about Jesus through PLINY? Again, we know he existed. He had very, 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 very faithful followers who were willing to die for him. Okay, and worshipped him as God. Again, other information that we see in the Bible as well. Now, next one is really, really interesting. Okay, we're going to read what Matthew writes about what happened when Jesus actually died. Sarah, if you don't mind reading this for us.
From noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over all the land. About 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, my God, why have you forsaken me? And when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. At the moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook and rocks split, and the tombs broke open. The bodies of many holy people that died were raised to life. When the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and all that had happened, they were terrified and exclaimed, surely he was the Son of God.
Okay. So, most secular historians, they look at the Bible as history, but they don't believe in resurrection, miracles, and things like that. So when they read something like this, they're like, okay, yes, Matthew, of course, Jesus died on the cross. We see that in secular historians like TACITUS and Josephus. They already wrote about that. But he's like dramatizing it. What is he saying? From noon to 3, there came darkness. So what does that indicate? Okay, what happens when there's some kind of darkness during the day? Eclipse. He's saying there was an eclipse. And right after the eclipse, what happened? There was an earthquake as well. So a lot of people who read this, they said, okay, Matthew, you're being dramatic. You're making because it's very dramatic, like Jesus is dying on the cross and there's like an earthquake, things like that. It's like, come on. Okay, so for a very, very long time, people are like, he's just adding in unnecessary detail. Jesus just died on the cross and that's it. However, they found TALLUS, okay, he's a Roman historian, in 52 AD. And he wrote about natural disasters. Okay? Now, we don't have his original writings, but another historian, his name is JULIUS AFRICANUS, he quotes what TALLUS wrote in his book. So we don't have what TALLUS actually wrote because it's lost in history, but we have JULIUS AFRICANUS who quotes TALLUS. Does that make sense? It's a little confusing. Okay, this is what he says. On the whole world, there pressed the most fearful darkness. Eclipse. And rocks were rent by an earthquake. The many places in Judea and other districts were thrown down. So JULIUS AFRICANUS, he's writing about natural, and then he quotes TALLUS. This darkness, TALLUS, in the 3rd book of his book calls, okay, and we don't have that book, as appears to me without a reason, an eclipse of the sun. So he's saying in Judea and all parts of the world, there was an eclipse and there was an earthquake. PLINY records that in the time of what? Tiberius Caesar. Okay, when did Jesus die? Do Do you guys remember what Tacitus said? He says Pontius Pilate under what? King Tiberius. Again, at full noon, which is exactly that time where Jesus died, there was a full eclipse of the sun from the 6th hour to the 9th. He's writing in Romans time. And then Matthew, he's writing from Jewish time. That's exactly the same time. 12 to 3. Okay? There was a full eclipse of the sun from the 6th hour to the 9th, manifestly that one of which we speak. Okay? So basically, we see from secular historians that Matthew is not dramatizing things. There was actually an eclipse during that time. There was actually an earthquake. Okay. Last one, and then we'll finish. Okay, there's Talmud. Okay, now, as you guys know, do you guys know what Talmud is? Talmud is Jewish wisdom literature. If you guys were born in Korean, it's called TALMUD. And Korean parents, they love TALMUD because it has a lot of stories of wisdom. Okay? Now, this is a religious book, obviously. Okay? But again, Jewish people really, really dislike Christians. So they're not biased against Christians. But Talmud has some oral writings, traditions of Jesus. So let's see what they say. It was the writings are from 200 to 500 AD. Okay? And these are some of the things that they said about Jesus. Number 1, Mary, who's the mother of Jesus, was a descendant of princes and governors and played the harlot with carpenters. Okay, what are they saying? They're basically trying to discredit who? Mary. Okay? Why are they trying to discredit Mary by saying, she was sleeping around with a lot of guys? Why are they trying to discredit her? Because they're trying to go against some things. Because in the Bible it actually says she had a virgin birth. And so they're going against that. They're saying, no, that wasn't no virgin birth. It was because she was sleeping around with all these people. Does that make sense? So even though they're discrediting something because there is something going on saying, rumor going around saying something about Jesus' birth. Does that make sense? All right. Another one, it is not actually stated, but it is written, bloody and deceitful man shall not live out half their days. And it follows that Jesus was 33 or 34 years old. So they're basically saying, don't you guys know that liars, people who are lying, they don't live a long time? Oh, by the way, Jesus, he died when he was 33. So what are they saying? They're basically discrediting Jesus. But because they're discrediting Jesus, they're telling us something. What does this tell us? That, again, Jesus existed. When did he die? 33 or 34. Again, that's what we see in the Bible as well. Jesus was executed because he practiced sorcery. Jesus is being boiled in hot excrement. Okay? So again, they're saying negative things, but there's, for us, again, Jesus existed. What happened? How did he die? He was executed. And they say it's sorcery, so he must have done some kind of miracle. That's why they're saying it's like black magic. Does that make sense? Next one. On the eve of the Passover, Jesus was hanged. Again, they tell you exactly how he died. On the cross. Do you suppose that he's the one for whom a defense could be made? Was he not an enticer? So again, Jesus existed. We know how he died as well. Next one. Christians and others who reject the Talmud will go to hell and be punished there for all generations. Those who read the New Testament will have no portion in the world to come. Okay? So again, this tells you how much the Jewish people hated the Christians back then. Okay. So going back to our original argument, there is not a single word about Jesus in secular history, not a word, no mention of him by the Romans. Absolutely, absolutely incorrect. Okay? Okay, so let's say we threw out all the religious writing. We threw out the Bible altogether. And we only look at Josephus, Tacitus, Pliny the Younger, Julius Africanus, THALLUS. Okay, just the secular historians, what do we get? We know that he was a Jewish, well, number one, we know he existed for sure. We know that he was a Jewish teacher. He did miracles, had many followers. He died under Pilate, Pontius Pilate, on the cross. And around the time he died, there was an earthquake and then an eclipse. His followers continued to hold on to their faith until torture and death, even his own brother, which is James. Is it similar to the Bible? Absolutely. But even if we didn't have the Bible, we would get all of this information about Jesus. So again, this idea that, Jesus existed in history. Yeah. Okay, last one. There's a counter argument to this, and they say, okay, Jesus was like a celebrity. There was like so many people following him. He was doing miracles, and he was doing all of these things. If that was the case, okay, why is it that only a few historians wrote about him? Shouldn't there be more history, secular historians writing about him? Okay, so let's say somebody said that to you. How would you respond to this? Okay, so the argument is, yes, there's definitely some secular historians who write about Jesus, but he was such a popular person. Like so many people followed after him. He was such a polarizing figure. Shouldn't there be more writings about him? How would you respond to that? Go for it. With your groups, see how you would respond.
As you know, people are he's so big, more we only have like 4 or 5 examples of things. Why is it that we mentioned why he's so insignificant? I feel like there are bigger things than that. You said it was big, that's what we're talking about, big things. We're talking about Christianity, how long this war, what we live in, oil, our nation's war, about 300 years. History, to write about it, you need to know about it. I think, to me, that kind of makes sense. Well, so you know, 300 years later, Japanese, American, we know that there's a Christian to write about. My point is like, someone told me about Japanese. Yeah, go around. A lot of in LA where you were, there's a bunch of people who from World War II. This really is not well, I haven't, I pride myself in like, I didn't know about that. It's an example of how we sometimes there's a lot of things we don't know. That's how it's happening. Big deal for Christians.
All right, let's come together. How would you respond to this? It's pretty simple. Okay, this is Roman Empire. Okay, where was Jesus? He was right here. Okay, how long was his ministry? 3 years. He never went. This is all he went. He went up and down right here. Okay, how many people did he have by the time he died? How many people followed him? Like really followed him? Like maybe 50 to 70 people? Okay. So he wasn't that big of a significant, he wasn't significant at all. Okay, maybe around this area he was well known. But of course Roman history don't care about this like tiny little thing. Like would a church, like would CNN come and like interview a church it lasted 3 years, 50, 70. You know what I mean? They weren't. Okay, so the argument itself, like, why isn't Jesus written more? That's not a very good argument because Jesus wasn't actually big. If anything, it's more of a surprise that Christianity grew so big that we even have history of Christians. Does that make sense? All right. All right, let's go into our discussion time. Anything new? Anything interesting? Any questions? Go for it.
You can say, well, these guys probably lied, but you couldn't really go that route. A lot of our history is based on our knowledge of Roman history is based on very recent
They even have like case laws about where they say person is like but not that we have letters of Paul and it's not very empty. Like even before the first gospel mark. So that's why he's such a big, powerful figure that becomes credited as like a fellow creator of Christianity because we talk about Jesus Christ so much after the
I mean, like, we failed in the sense of, like, we're like, oh, so there was a guy named Jesus. He was at the son of the third.
I'm trying to remember the conversation of why Christianity started to like he impacted so many people in every city that he was like all over again. He wasn't like big or something. He was like all over, you know.
Actually, really what
You are really bad. The more that you try to deny the Bible, the more truth that you're going to find. I forgot the line. There was a program, there's a guy, who wanted to find, who wanted to prove that the Bible is wrong.
Yo, you didn't
And
do
he
your
studied
research?
many years. And
You're going to write a whole book, like, tell them all that.
the more I didn't read all the letters, what I remember is like, what he was saying, like, the more that I try to disprove the Bible, the only question I'm getting from the history and everything is that it's the
I don't know, maybe.
There's no way that I can deny it.
It's such a glaring mistake.
No, he didn't write the book. He was like, he was kind of explaining, like, and then he was like, this is why I became a Christian, and he was like, there's a, how do I say, different people, like 20 years ago, one of my friends, like, recommended it. I kind of liked it, he was not a Christian, and he wanted to attack Christianity, and then he wanted to attack the Bible.
Later I found out, he wrote a religious text 3 years ago.
Later on, he tried to find out that the Bible is true, and then he admitted that.
Where did it go wrong?
So the thing that the more you try to study,
It's like a celebrity pastor.
whether you want to believe it or not, you're gonna find out that it's a